When Jim Jones lost his temper and lunged at Camron in front of a yelling crowd, it nearly spilled outside the courthouse. However, this wasn't your typical Harlem argument. Rather, it was deceit gone savage. Jim felt like a bullet to the chest as Chrissy's worst secret was revealed in court. The cameras were rolling, the mics were live, and Jim yelled at Camron. The entire business has been rocked by this guy's assertion that the Camron knew all along. Some people think Chrissy set it up, while others are afraid to speak. However, nobody is telling you that there's a missing. Jim discovered that he had been treated like a fool for years after seeing a leaked paper and an audio clip that purportedly captured the incident. Why was Camron there? Why did Chrissy look dead in the eyes? He was exposed by the judge, and why is everyone quiet now? Something significant is being concealed, but we're spilling the beans because once you hear what really happened, you won't ever look at them the same way once more. Outside the Manhattan courthouse, there were side looks and hushed conversations, but no one expected Jim Jones to lose it like this. Was apparent as rumors, lies, and the kind of betrayal that could shake anyone to their foundation filled the air. Camron, a normally composed but unexpected figure, had been keeping a low profile, but that wouldn't last long. At the heart of it all was Chrissy Lampkin, whose name in the hip-hop business was previously connected to love and loyalty, but now carried the weight of controversies and whispers. But this was no longer about gossip since the proof was strong, and the courtroom had just turned into a battleground for which nobody was ready. The chamber fell silent as the judge's gavel struck to begin the hearing, and all eyes were on Jim, who was struggling to control this anger and uncertainty. Make sense of what was happening. The judge received a paper from a court clerk, and it became clear that Chrissy Lampkin had been concealing something significant when Jim raised his voice. His fists were clenched and his knuckles were white, but no one could have foreseen what happened next. Camron, who had been sitting a few feet away, got up. He was so furious that she was lying. His expression was calm, but the tension between him and Jim seemed to be strong enough to pierce the walls of the courthouse. As everyone waited to see what would happen next, Jim became irate. His voice was poisonous as the tension increased as the two men's eyes locked. You were aware of this, you knew what she was up to, and you never told me. Rushing through their brains, but Camron, who was cool and collected, did not bat an eye. Let's take this outside, he muttered. Jim, driven by a combination of treachery and the crowd gazed on as his comments sliced through the courtroom air. You think I'm going to walk away from this after everything we've been through? Uncertain of what would happen next, Jim hurried out of the courtroom, leaving a trail of rumors and speculation in his wake. It was clear that he wasn't going to let this go without a fight. Following him, they were nervous but resolute. Once they left the courtroom, the mood changed. The typical commotion of the courthouse grounds sounded like a far-off hum in contrast to the. Jim was pacing back and forth in the electric tension between the two guys, his mind racing with everything that had just happened to him. Chrissy's betrayal wasn't just about her, though. Regarding everything they had built together, including friendship, trust, and commitment, Camron Jim Jones said, "What the hell is going on?" As his voice rose. "She's been lying to me the entire time, and you." Camron remained silent and took a deep breath. His face was expressionless. I didn't realize Jim was misinterpreting this. "I've got your back." Jim spun around, his eyes blazing with anger. "Don't believe. You had to trust me, Guy. You knew something was up. How long were you going to let her treat me like a fool?" Camron fought to save his job. He didn't know the whole truth. Remained hard, but his eyes were strained. Whatever was happening with Chrissy Lampkin was much deeper than any of them, and for a while, Jim's eyes softened. He didn't want to accept it. belief that a family member he had trusted could betray him in this way, but the evidence was there for him to refute. What the devil are we going to do now, Jim? We need to figure this out together. We've got to get to the bottom of this, Camron said as he approached, his anger gradually transforming into a somber understanding. When they had finished arguing, a loud voice demanding attention from behind them broke the atmosphere. Hey, are you two going to stand here and argue, or are we going to do something about this? The paparazzi had come, and Jim and Camron turned to see a group of reporters with cameras trained on them. Why don't you two tell us what happened in the courthouse? Is Chrissy's betrayal the reason for the rift? Another reporter asked, while another reporter sobbed. Jim's expression darkened even more as the questions started to pour in. With the entire world watching, he wasn't in the mood for interviews, but the damage was already done. You're making this worse, Jim yelled at the reporters. Furious you don't know what's actually happening here. But as he screamed, the cameras flashed more, catching every moment of this developing drama for the world to witness. The world is watching us, Camron said softly as he pulled Jim aside as the throng of reporters hurried around them. We can't keep doing this, man. Jim nodded slowly, his face tensing. He knew Camron was correct, but there was something more profound that Jim couldn't. Jim wasn't prepared to back down, but the betrayal was about everything now, not just Chrissy Lampkin. The friendships, secrets, and falsehoods were all on the line. The world was watching the two men as they stood there involved in their own private war, and the betrayal had been revealed. We'll handle it our way, but we're doing it on our terms. One thing was evident as the cameras flashed around them. This was just the start of the storm. The events outside the courthouse were nothing short of chaotic, and the media storm was in full force. Every source, from the biggest gossip websites to the local newspapers, was consuming the drama. But Jim Jones was far from prepared to let it go. Jim's phone buzzed, and his mind raced. Chrissy's betrayal had been painful, but as the screen filled with an unceasing barrage of messages, Jim moved from one thing to another and became increasingly aware that there were things that he didn't know and should have anticipated. Jim muttered, I don't trust anyone anymore, as he stared at his phone while the messages came in. Camron stayed by his side. Sigh, take a. He took a long drag from his cigar and looked at Jim. You're right to feel that way, but don't let your rage get the better of you. You need to consider this. Jim, we're in the midst of something bigger. Looked up at Camron. His face hardened even more than Chrissy's betrayal, and he continued, something strange. This isn't just about her lying to you. There's more at Jim, believe me, didn't respond right away. Instead, he just looked ahead, his thoughts confused. He had always trusted Camron, and they had experienced a lot together. But now that the pieces were in place, Jim couldn't deny the feeling that something more profound was beginning to take shape. The two men walked in silence for a few minutes till they arrived at the remote area of the... Hey, what's the issue with Chrissy Lampkin? Jim Jones asked the guy on the phone after Jim took out his phone and dialed the number in the courthouse parking lot. You really don't know, do you? Jim's heart skipped the beat. What the hell are you talking about? There's more to it, said the person on the other end of the phone, echoing his low, panicked voice. You've just seen the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to Chrissy's story than you realize, the voice went on, sounding almost amused. She's been making some significant gains behind your back. He clenched his fist beneath the gym, his claws digging into his hand. I swear, if she's been playing tricks on me, I'm going to make her regret it, the woman on the phone said icily. I wouldn't be too. He stared at his phone for a while, the words echoing in his mind. I'm sure, Jim, you're going to learn the hard way. The conversation stopped before Jim could respond. Ugly for you. What the hell was that supposed to mean? He raised an eyebrow, changed the camera, and his face was a mask of doubt and anger that wasn't merely a... Jim was ready to continue when his phone rang. It was a warning but a threat. I don't know who it was, but they knew something about Chrissy Lampkin that may cause everything to fall apart. His heart pounded as he opened the message, which said, "We need to talk about don't know the complete story," this time from Chrissy Lampkin rather than an unknown number. Jim's brows furrowed as he said, "She's been playing me like a damn fool. Please don't do anything crazy." However, prior to, he had time to respond when another message arrived. Jim recognized the location, a small remote area where he and Chrissy had spent countless times together. But this time the stakes were different. It was no longer about love, but rather betrayal. He glanced up at Camron, his mind racing. "I'm going, but I'm not going in blind. I need your support." Camron nodded. "I've got you, man, but we can't just stroll into a quiet conversation. We need to be ready for everything." Jim agreed that he had no idea what Chrissy would say, but he was certain of one thing, whatever it. When Jim and Camron got at the rendezvous later that evening, it was deserted, with only a dim street lamp in the distance for illumination. Jim's hands were tightened into fists at his sides as he moved toward the entrance. Jim saw Chrissy seated in the corner of the room, looking calm but concerned. Her face softened when heard. Jim's tummy twisted with anxiety when she saw him, but her eyes were frigid. Chrissy said, "What the hell is going on? You've been lying to me and playing me for a fool, and now you want it." "Jim, please allow me to explain that I never intended for any of this to occur." Chrissy gazed up at him, her expression unreadable. Jim placed his arms across his chest and said, "I'm listening, Chrissy." Said, "I never meant to harm you, Jim, but there are things I couldn't tell you that go much beyond just me." Her eyes darted to the floor as though she was searching for the right words. Jim's eyes sparkled with, "Jim," Chrissy said in a quivering voice, "they have dirt on me, stuff that could ruin everything, and I was backed into a corner." "Anger? What do you mean? Don't give me what the hell is going on." Jim looked at her with a look of incredulity on his face and said there's nothing else to do but accept it. Before she could respond, the door behind them slammed shut, and Jim's heart raced as the room grew dark. What the devil is happening? A stranger emerged from the shadows. Jim never thought he would see this person, someone who had been pulling strings. Behind the scenes, however, Jim realized that the truth was more lethal than he had ever imagined. The tension in the room was palpable, and Jim's heart pounded as he stared. His fist instantly clenched as he looked at the man who had just entered the shadows, attempting to make sense of the situation but finding it difficult. He then turned to face Chrissy, who seemed as shocked as he was. "Who the heck are you?" Jim said sharply, and the figure didn't move fast enough to enter the weak spot. Light, Jim was able to discern their outline, and as the figure moved closer, Jim's icy Camron said in amazement, "They're standing in front of him, none other than Camron." Jim, the man who was supposed to be his brother, but you don't know the full story. The same person who had supported him through everything, the one who had stood by him when no one else would. Story Cameron's response was somber, almost scary, but Jim shook his head, his mind whirling. "It's time you realize the truth and stop being blind to the bigger picture. I didn't mean to offend you, but what are you talking about, given that you've been by my side the entire time?" About Chrissy's eyes darting between Jim and Camron Jim. "No, Chrissy, you've been playing me from the beginning. I can't believe you do this." But now Camron has also been a part of Jim's face, twisted in worry. "What is this? Some kind of sit-up?" Cameron's eyes briefly softened, almost as though he was sad for Jim, but then they returned to their usual stony look. "I've been working behind the scenes for longer than you think, Jim, and it's not a setup when business was involved." Cameron's voice grew more cold with each phrase, as if Chrissy was just the beginning. She wasn't the real deal. The weight of his confession was finally removed from his shoulders. I never meant to hurt you either, but there were bigger issues at stake. Jim, his old buddy, the one guy he believed he could trust, had been working behind the scenes and had been betraying him all along. He staggered back, his brain swimming with the shock of it all. Scenes with the very individuals trying to destroy him, you've been working with them, Jim stated in a low that was hardly audible. Yes, Camron responded in a dejected tone, but not for the Jim. I was the inside man who fed them information and watched your every move. You were the key to bringing everything down, which is why you believe you've been the target for a long time, and giving them the opportunity to strike, but not anymore. What do you mean? Jim's voice was shaky, and his emotions were running high. You suppose you can just leave me after? All of your actions have caused Camron's eyes to lock onto Jim's with a cold determination. I'm done with them, but I'm also done with you since you were loyal for far too long and failed to see the bigger picture. Jim was able to respond when he heard a motor engine screaming outside, and Camron's countenance was neutral as he motioned for Jim to join him. The abrupt change in tone. Jim was completely taken aback by Camron's coolness and detached demeanor. What was happening? Why was Camron acting so strangely? Let's go, Camron whispered, turning around and advancing toward the door before Jim halted. He spent some time trying to process everything that had just happened, but his mind was racing, jumping from one surprising idea to the next. What was the bigger picture? Why had he been so blind to it that he had followed Camron outside, feeling as though he was walking straight into a trap? The sound of a car door slamming shut was heard. Jim's heart fell to his stomach as he saw the black SUV with tinted windows standing in front of them in the parking lot. "We're leaving," Camron stated in a loud voice. "And Jim, you had better be prepared because this isn't just about you anymore." Jim's stomach turned as he got closer to the car, unsure of what to expect and whom to believe. But one thing was certain. The game was different, the stakes were higher than ever, and the two guys got into the SUV, the door slamming shut behind them. Jim, who couldn't see the driver, began. As they drove through the dark streets, the car and vehicle started to move silently. Jim kept his eyes on Camron and attempted to read his countenance for signs of anxiety. There was no indication that this was all a twisted prank, but when the car stopped, the driver didn't pull into a typical parking lot. Instead, they arrived at an abandoned building. Jim's nerves were tense, his senses detesting what was occurring, and the windows were boarded up and covered in dirt. Where were they taking him? The door opened, and two men who... Jim followed Camron, who seemed to be leading the way, his thoughts racing. He had no idea where they were going, but the feeling of dread inside him was almost unbearable. Structure Jim found himself in a poorly lit room with a big table in the middle and a group of individuals seated around it. The shadows covered their faces, and Jim's heart was racing. Jim's eyes widened as he recognized the figure who had risen to his feet. The man's voice was terrifying and seductive. "Don't tell me you're involved in this too, Jim." The man replied with a cold sneer, "This is just the beginning, Jim. You're going to find out the truth." He was barely able to believe what he was hearing. "Yeah, I'm more than involved." The room fell silent as Jim realized he was much further into something than he had ever imagined. This was about more than simply Chrissy and Camron. It was about something much larger. Jim Jones was deceived by the person he trusted the most, and he was dragged into a world of deceit. This is the shocking reality that no one saw coming. Deceit and betrayal that is more pervasive than we could have ever thought. But the question still stands. Who is really responsible for all of this? What is their goal? And where does this sinister path lead? Leave now. We have just touched the surface, and trust me, this isn't done to miss what will happen next. However, justice always finds its way, right? Do you think Jim Jones will? I would like to know if he can fight his way out of this, or if he has already lost the war. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below, as they could change everything. Revealed like this, remember to subscribe, and then hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss any more surprises or insights. I want to be present for the next. Keep an eye on the iceberg and remain tuned, because sometimes the most startling facts are also the most challenging. This is just the tip of the iceberg. To accept the capture, see you later.